Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kramer. I have Amy Wong with us. We're going to talk about self-sabotage and some really powerful mindset stuff today. This is going to be a great interview. I know it's going to be loaded with value. And Amy, I'm pretty confident that you're going to be able to help shift some mindsets today. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
Let's start by giving our listeners a little bit of an overview, who you are, what you do. Can you tell us a little bit about your business? I know you got a lot going on. I know you're an author. I know you're a speaker. I know you've been at this for a long time. Now I'm asking you to condense it down, but I know you can do it. So can you start there?
Absolutely. So I am an executive coach and I work with leaders, founders, and their teams on all things growth, transformation, and flow. I mean, because all of us want flow, right? And one of my areas of expertise is communication. And what's interesting about that, it's everybody instinctively wants to get better at communication. And I know it's because we all get that that's where everything's happening is in this layer of communication, because we don't live in a vacuum. And so for me, that layer really is an entry point to get to that real stuff, because all communication is just a symptom of the mindsets we hold, the interpretations we make, the beliefs we hold, really the relationship with self. And so, I've been doing this for, well over a decade. And my business, my firm, Always on Purpose, it's what we've just been marching strong here. And I feel like I live a miracle every day.
I love it. And you've probably done a lot of your own mindset work as well. I know most of us have and continue to do so. You are somewhat of a subject matter expert on self-sabotage, and I want to start there. Everyone listening has experienced some degree of self-sabotage. Some people listening are like, hello, me over here, really bad self-sabotage. We, in some cases, are aware that we're doing it and don't know how to stop, don't know how to change it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's those other times where we don't even know we're doing it.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, all of us, we have dreams, we have goals, we have desires. And at the end of all of that, we all just want to feel good. We want to feel free. We want to feel significant. We want to feel meaning. We want to feel joy. We want to feel connected. Everything we want in life, it's actually not for the goal we set. It's because of the feeling we think we would have as a result of that goal. And so all of it, that's just human nature, to have dreams and desires, to move in the direction of feeling better, which usually means to achieve more, to succeed. So we've got goals. So I think as a common denominator, it's safe to say all of us have stuff we want to achieve. All of us have these ideas of, if I were to accomplish this, my life would be so much better. And so for those big, juicy goals that we can have, it's almost always the case. I haven't met one human that has said to me, oh yeah, there is nothing in my way for that. And I don't stop myself short. I don't hesitate. No, what is almost always the case is I'm going to get in my way somehow. Right. And when I say self-sabotage, what I'm talking about is all the stuff that we're consciously and more so unconsciously doing, that we are putting obstacles on our path between where we are and where we want to be. And we're doing it. And so the big question is, why? Why do we do that? Are we addicted to the drama? Maybe. Right? Do we think it's going to help us? Probably not. But the truth is, all of us get in our own way. Right? And where I get curious is, well, what's the nature of that? And I have to tell you right now, 100%, it's fear. Right. And so this conversation gets really interesting when we start to double click on the nature of what that fear really is, why it's there, and how we manage the discomfort of it. So that's where this conversation starts.
Yeah. We do hold a lot of fears that are very elusive. to our conscious mind. The fears are, I use the word insidious. Our limiting beliefs are insidious.
Yeah.
They are there just sort of lurking in the shadows, hiding conveniently behind what appears to be justifiable excuses and genuine limitations. And our subconscious mind is really just trying to protect us from that thing that it does not want to experience.
Yeah.
For someone who knows they have that goal, and we've got right now, we're talking to an audience of entrepreneurs, small business owners, people who are motivated, they're driven, they want to provide value for their families, themselves, their customers and clients. They want to make a positive impact on the world. Yet there is that element of, what in the hell is going on within me? Why would I be blocking this? Why would I be stopping this? They don't know where to look. It's one thing to say, okay, maybe there's some fears there. And maybe I'm even aware of some of those fears, like I'm afraid that if I publish, more of my true authentic self online, that people are going to criticize me, or they're going to say that I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy. We're aware of some of the fears, but I think it sometimes is a little bit more complex than just one fear. So what do you see?
Yeah, so it appears to be more complex, but it does boil down to one thing. And I love how you kind of set this up. I'll just break it down. It's, when our fears are obvious, that's great. But like you said, they are insidious, and it can be hard to pinpoint. And then even more maddeningly, is that the word? And more frustratingly is we can't totally put our finger on why it's there. But here's what's going on. And I'm going to break something down here that I wish we were talking about more as humans. We're not talking about it enough. This is why I am on a mission to bring more awareness to what I'm about to say. But when it comes to being human, a couple things are true. And I'm going to talk about the brain, right? So when we're born as a human, we're born survival brain dominant, right? So we are neurologically underdeveloped, and we're born hardwired to survive. Now, the prefrontal cortex, this part, the executive functioning part, this doesn't start developing until adolescence, and it's not fully formed until your mid-20s. Okay, so that's just what's true. But when you really stop and pay attention to what life and death means to a human, check this out. When a human is born, fact number one, you're born hardwired to survive, neurologically underdeveloped. Fact number two, you're helpless as an infant. And so therefore you need a caregiver, your mom or your dad, to survive. So what we've been taught is that, for us to survive, we need the basic needs like food, water, shelter in order to be safe and to survive. Yeah, now we need those things, but to the brain, that is not the most important thing, because food, water, and shelter are going to be so much more possible if mom or dad buy in, if others buy in. And so therefore, what we're not talking about, which we need to be talking about, is that death to the human brain is rejection. And there is a wiring in us that has us fearing and avoiding rejection, like we avoid tigers with sharp teeth and people with sharp knives. And this wiring is it's subcognitive, right? And in fact, here's just a couple of facts that I think people always find this so interesting. Rejection is an experience. Now think about rejection, right? So I'm not just talking about, big fat no, I'm not going to go out with you Friday night, right? So that is rejection. But rejection is felt in other ways. That's judgment, criticism, not getting included in a meeting, not getting eye contact, like all of these ways where we don't feel like we're being accepted, approved of, or like that we belong. That registers as physical pain in the brain. It registers in what's called the pain matrix, which is unlike any other emotion. And so naturally, our brain is hardwired to avoid that. And here's why. The brain's trying to keep you alive. And so it sees, it's one of its primary jobs is to, keep you safe from threats. And the brain cannot differentiate between, say, someone chasing after you with a knife and a colleague throwing you under the bus in a meeting. To the brain, environmental threats and social threats are one and the same. Okay, now I share this because on a non-cognitive level, your perception, your perceptive ability is absolutely influenced by this need to stay safe. And so if you think about, just lean into this for a moment. If you look at all the fears you could ever feel or you've ever experienced, right? And I try to get down to the most basic one for folks. And what I tend to hear is, I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of disappointing others, right? And it usually goes down to that. I'm afraid of judgment. Now, if you look at all of those, notice how it really stems from this primal fear of rejection. Failure. Why? Well, guess what? If I fail, I'm going to be seen unfavorably. If I'm seen unfavorably, I'm not part of the group. If I'm not part of the group, I'm going to die. Right? Same thing about disappointing others. If I disappoint others, oh my goodness, I'm not going to be part of the group. I'm not going to be in the in group. That's like rejection. I'm going to die. Another criticism. I mean, this is one of the biggest ones. And I think a lot of us are more hard on ourselves than we need to be. But this fear of judgment and criticism, like we don't want to put ourselves out there. We don't want to do the public talk. We don't want to, we're so afraid of criticism. And yeah, because it's triggering like rejection. And so one of the most fundamental steps we can take to choosing and embodying, creating a life and that we absolutely love is to wake up from this primal fear, recognize that it does significantly influence every aspect of your perception. And then the moment you have awareness of this, you can choose otherwise. Because until you know this fundamental foundation from which all of these other seemingly unrelated fears come from, you can do differently. You can act differently. And that's what it's about. Being on purpose in your life is being able to harness choice, but you can't do that unless you know what's going on underneath the hood, right? And so when it comes to self-sabotage, 100%, well, let's see. I don't want to be so certain. Let's just say in most cases, I'm having a hard time thinking of one that wouldn't map to this, but when it comes to self-sabotage, it's always because we're protecting ourselves from social threats, namely from the fear of judgment, failure, rejection. Yeah.
You hear these things that are somewhat cliche now about developing thick skin, and you can't let yourself be brought down by the haters and, all of this stuff, which is really just kind of preaching this whole idea that you've got to sort of rise above it.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, they're able to put on the thick skin, so to speak. In some ways, I think they even can train themselves to be desensitized to it. And then we see the people who are just sort of arrogant, and they're just wearing that arrogance almost like a protective shield. And it works to a certain extent until it's not,
right,
because you're pushing everybody away, and
that's right,
you're not such a pleasant person to be around. For those who are listening, who understand they have to be able to sort of shake it off, they have to let go of the fear, what tips or guidance do you have?
Well, I love that you bring this up, because what you're talking about, there's two ways to go about growing thick skin. And if we do it in an unawake way, that too is a survival mechanism to further protect oneself from, lack of approval, lack of acceptance, not belonging. And that too is just feeding into our defense mechanisms that have us playing small, having us appear as arrogant when we're not able to effectively leverage our relationships. But, so there's that way of going about it. But here's the thing, when you really tune into this and recognize that all of us are craving, non-consciously, consciously, but really more so non-consciously, we are craving a sense of acceptance, belonging, and approval. And every moment our brain is trying to ensure that we are safe, that we are part of a group, and that we are being seen and acknowledged. And so what happens is when you really start to see this, then all of a sudden you get that the stuff that comes at you isn't really personal. And that's their stuff, because they're trying to find ways to find power, to find meaning, to find safety in this structure. And so you can start to distance yourself from the stuff out there because it means nothing, absolutely nothing about you. Speaking of, I think this is actually a lovely way to pivot into a massive topic, a really important topic around self-sabotage, which is limiting beliefs, self-limiting beliefs, right? There's one of the ways that we can hold ourselves back is because we're entertaining some form of a belief, whether we realize it or not, something like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I don't belong, I'm not worthy. And that too, I mean, it gets so interesting, Alicia. The reason that we imprint and we take on those false limiting beliefs, and this is why I wrote about this in my book, Living on Purpose, because I needed more people to know this. The reason we take those on at some point, because we're not born with that, by the way. We're not born. I mean, if you look at a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they're playing and having fun, you know for a fact they're not believing that about themselves. At some point in our development, we take it on, and here's why. Some stage early on, as our brain is developing, it's the first experience of significant perceived rejection, that all of a sudden our brain's like, whoa, my gosh, what is this? You're about to die. Wait, hold on. Okay, I got to protect you. I got to understand why this happened. You know what? You must not be good enough. And so your underdeveloped brain imprints a limiting belief in order to make sense of the pain. And it makes sense of this experience that was incredibly threatening. And the reason we imprint that is because it's brilliant and it's tragic. This is the brain and psyche's way of saying, okay, but if I take this on, I'm not good enough. Essentially, like taking on that belief is like putting on glasses. I'm not good enough glasses. I'm doing that so that I can now forevermore be strategic and avoid all the things that might expose me as not good enough, and then seek all the things that prove that I'm good enough. All because in this model, if you get found out as not good enough, that's evidence that you're not worthy, which means I'm going to die. And so it's as triggering as I'm going to die, right? So because that's the ultimate proof. If it gets proved that you're not good enough with these glasses on, it's as triggering as that's it. I'm found out, I'm going to die. And so we unconsciously live our lives conditionally doing everything we can to prove ourselves safe from being found out, from this belief that's not even true. It's not even true. But you had to take it on in order to make sense of that really, really scary experience. And the reason I get really passionate about this is what I've found, and what tends to be true here, is that the moment you wake up to what's happening here, where this comes from, all of a sudden the tangle starts to untangle. Its grip lessens. And it really comes down to, and now I have different choices. I'm not driven. I'm not being controlled by these biological drives and subconscious impulses. I see more clearly now. And that's what this is about, Alicia. It's to harness choice in a new way so that you can be on purpose, not kind of on autopilot, right? And that's really, there's nothing that feels better than that, right? To be on purpose. Yeah.
You shared such a practical, relatable example of how we develop these limiting beliefs. For somebody who really got that, like it made so much sense to them, it's much easier to see how all of these limiting beliefs that we are sort of dragging along, we're trying to work against our own subconscious in a lot of respects, and that makes it pretty difficult. It's kind of funny and kind of sad, right? How you see these diagrams of the entrepreneurial journey, the success journey, right? And it's like squiggly and it's all over the place. And you've got to stop and ask yourself, well, why is it so hard for most people? And granted, there are learning curves, and there's, certain things that we have to do. There are certain skills you have to learn as a business owner. You have to learn how to manage a team. You have to learn how to market. You have to become more proficient at selling. You have to make sure you're providing a good product or service. Those are all things that can sometimes seem like a temporary setback because there's a little bit of a learning curve. But what I'm talking about here is what we do to ourselves. Mm-hmm. So if someone is ready to just stop the insanity, they recognize that maybe they've been on the crazy train for way longer than they need to be. They know that they've got a mind that's full of these limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
They understand that there's some wiring that needs to be rewired. Yeah. What is a next step that you would recommend for somebody who's really ready to start moving in a more empowered direction?
Yeah. There's a couple things. And I would say I'll start more topically, because this can often be enough for folks, is just take what I've said about this primal fear of rejection. Know that it is live in all of us. It determines the relationship we have with ourselves, that really forms the lens that we look out through, that really gives rise to our reality. All of us have this primal fear, and all of us have defense mechanisms to protect ourselves from the pain that really is the reason why we all show up the way that we do. And when you really get that, then topically, then what I invite y'all to do is just know that you got this tiny little switch in your head, that I'm either going to be controlled by this fear or not. And when you wake up to being in the driver's seat around this and say, you know what? I'm going to recognize that I've been driven by fear, this fear of rejection. I've been driven by this fear of judgment. I've been driven by this fear that is so primal that I'm just going to accept that and I'm just going to let it go. It's that simple. It's a mindset shift. And the reason you can take this on is because this is fundamental to our human development. It's just fundamental to the human experience. All of us have this. And unless you know about it, you will be a victim of it. But you don't have to be a victim of it the moment you know. And it's kind of like when you know so much, you can't go back, right? So now you all know so much, you can't go back. And so I invite you, just know that there's this tiny little switch, flip it. Like, you know what? I'm not going to let this rule me, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to die. If I go out and I do this big talk in front of people and it goes poorly, I'm not going to die. Wow. Like but at the end, I'm not going to let this control me. So that's the first thing. If that sounds interesting and you're like, yeah, but I'm not totally bought in yet, then what's the next thing to do is to go one layer deeper. And that's to identify the false limiting belief that you took on in order to survive your experience in the past that has formed your current lens. Because guess what? We all have them. We all have a lens that we are looking through that totally dictates what we see, what we listen for, and how we act. And it's all really about protecting ourselves. And so the question I'm going to invite you to ponder to get to the root of what you decided is this. And you have to answer from your survival brain. Don't answer from your brilliant brain. Here it is. What are you most afraid other people would either find out or decide about you? Now let that sink in. What are you most afraid other people would either find out or decide about you? Now, for most hyperachievers and the very ambitious types, it takes a moment because they're like, well, nothing. And I'm like, well, just answer from your survival brain. What would you hate? What would be really awful if other people thought about you? And it's like, gosh, that I wasn't competent, that I really didn't know what I was doing, whatever might come. The reason I ask this question in this way is because it's my backdoor way into helping you identify what you subconsciously believe about yourself. Now, why is that true? Well, because you wouldn't have a fear about it if it wasn't attached to you in some way. And so whatever you answer with is going to point to the belief, the subconscious or conscious belief that you took on in order to make sense of something that happened in the past. Now, if you really want to, you can go one layer deeper and go back to your earliest feeling memory of that. Like, gosh, I'd really hate for people to think that I'm not good enough. I invite you to go back to your earliest feeling memory, and it might not come right away. It might hit you in the shower tomorrow. It might hit you at 3 a.m. Who knows? But you don't have to do this. But if in that moment, you're like, oh, wow, I have this memory of being dropped off at kindergarten and guys, just remember how I felt. Chances are that might have been the formidable moment. Now, we do that just to help your logical brain unhook from this, because now you can see it with compassion and say, wow, this was really a smart decision I made in order to survive that pain. But unless we see it clearly, that's going to be determining our life. So essentially, you got a 4-year-old running the quality of your life right now. And so this kind of, if we start with the top and we kind of work downwards, that can be a very, very powerful to start to dislodge these hooks that are in us. Because what I'm all about is like, this isn't a quick fix. This is a way to give yourself choice. And once you have access to choice, you're golden, right? But unless you have access to choice, you're going to be a victim of these processes. So the only way to get there is awareness at the start, and then to start practicing a new choice so that it just becomes easier.
I love this conversation. And I know that there are people who really needed to hear this. I want to use this as the opportunity for you to share with our listeners how they can connect with you, how they can learn more. You mentioned a book, so make sure you tell us a little bit about that as well. And if there is a website anywhere else that you want to direct our listeners to.
Oh, thank you, Eliza. Absolutely. Well, if this is resonating with you and you want to dive in deeper, there is so much goodness. In my book, Living on Purpose by Eliza Wong, I break down the social neuroscience, the structures, the frameworks to really give you the roadmap to free yourself from all the self-imposed limitations. So that's Living on Purpose by Eliza Wong. You can get it Barnes and Noble. You can get it on Amazon. Highly, especially it's great for it's great for your team, because when you can all get on the same page as to the ways that we can thrive together. And then as far as staying in touch, my website is alwaysonpurpose.com. And I've got so much available there, lots of resources, lots of articles, tools. You can sign up for my newsletter. You can join my text community and get regular inspiration. And then where I tend to hang out the most on social is LinkedIn. And that's Eliza Wong. And I'd love to hang out with you. And if you have any questions, jump in and let me know. Let's keep the conversation going.
Awesome. Amy, thank you so much for being with us, sharing your energy, sharing your wisdom, dropping some truth bombs here to help people get out of their self-inflicted, self-sabotaging patterns. Great conversation, so much value. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you to all of our listeners. You know we're doing this for you. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.